Card games are everywhere in the rogue space, but deck builders need something special to appeal to me. The pristine experience of Slay the Spire, the deep mechanics of Balatro, or the fantastic world of Zetzillions are a few that stuck with me. Dice roguelites are a far rarer breed, and Die in the Dungeon has frogs, and frogs are the best, and so I was immediately in. Cards and dice should just be the start. I think we need to make more old-timey forms of entertainment into roguelikes. Bowling roguelike? What about a hopscotch roguelike? Where's my hoop and stick roguelike, Peter Molyneux? Come on! Die in the Dungeon takes place on a grid of squares, or triangles, or hexagons, depending on what type of dice you're placing. Placing dice uses up energy, some dice more than others, 3-sided dice use up none, 6 use 1 energy, and anything more is 2. The main core of this combat is defense and attack and boost dice. The boost dice buff a dice at a distance that is matching their value, which turns placing dice into a fine balancing act to try and stack as many bonuses as possible and optimize each turn. Dice are your rewards for defeating enemies, and we're quickly getting into deck building territory. Yes, Die in the Dungeon is a deck builder, but the deck is dice, so a dice bag builder, I guess? Once you've mastered the basics of attacking, defending, and buffing, there are healing dice, area of effect attack dice, dice which apply different effects like poison or thorns, which makes yourself deal damage when hit, all sorts. I find in runs you to be pretty eclectic with the dice that you select, or you'll draw hands which do nothing for you. A hand of boost dice is boosting nothing. Relics are the other rewards that you find along the way, which have all manner of effects, and before long you can stack these into some nutty combos. Take my combo from my first winning run for example. A relic to maintain defense across turns, which is usually lost if it's unused. Pair that with a relic that if I finish a turn with extra defense, I gain strength, buffing my attacks. Then stack loads of defense and buff dice, and eventually I'm untouchable. All while using a character that poisons enemies for just being around him. Presumably I'm a frog with very poor personal hygiene. Then it just becomes a challenge of maxing defense while outlasting my opponents. Finding these broken combos is always a high point for me in these games. The way the game uses the board to differentiate the enemies in the game is also really inspired. Different enemies bring different effects. Some will debuff parts of the board, others will block parts of the board. Some enemies need you to attack a particular square on the board, and others are buffed by an absence of dice and debuffed with the correct squares covered. This makes every encounter, biome, and new enemies unique. The acts, the 3 of them which make up the game, are broken into these maps of combat encounters, mini-boss fights, shops, special encounters, as well as mystery tiles, with a final boss at the end of the act. Picking the path based on what you think will best suit your growing build, or just surviving long enough to find something to elevate your current bag of dice, it's a pretty straightforward structure that won't be unfamiliar to any roguelike player. All in all, it's a really great core. Fun, varied gameplay, and a unique spin on deck builders by better utilizing the play space, the board. But for me, there were a few missteps along the way. I found my first win a little too easy. Now this may be because the initial difficulty isn't intended to be the final difficulty, but I did find the higher difficulties didn't add enough to differentiate themselves from a previous run. Fighting the same enemies and bosses gets stale really fast, and a couple of different biomes or a 4th act could really make these higher difficulties feel a bit fresher. I think the balance in the game puts you in either a feast or famine scenario. Some runs can feel like they never truly get going, but when you find success, sometimes it feels hard to fail. I love broken and insane relic combinations and then building my deck or weapons around them, like in any roguelike, or roguelite in this case. It's fun, it's rewarding, but some of these combos, especially the one I mentioned earlier, are a little bit too easy to put together. In fact, in each of my winning runs, I stumbled across the same combo of items I mentioned earlier. I didn't really find any other winning formulas. Yes, my character's relic and board changed, but the path to victory didn't. When I reached the shop before my final boss for the 3rd time, and saw the last item I needed for the build that I'd used in the last 2 runs, it felt less like a wide game of choices and more like a funnel bringing me to one inevitable point. The encounters outside of fights could do with some variety too. I saw a lot of repeats in this area of the game, and nothing too wild or wonderful. It had me thinking about Peglin, where mystery tiles could lead you to a boss battle against the boss of a previous biome that you didn't face, or there were altars where you could place one of your balls and it would duplicate it. Die in the Dungeon had a very similar multiple choice setup for these encounters, and coming across repeats of these was bad enough, but when they're all structured so similarly, it just lacked flavour. An idea I had for one of these sections would be to have a bit of a roll-off. You encounter a demon. If your dice roll beats his, he'll duplicate that dice. If it doesn't, he takes it. Do you use your best dice with the best chance of winning big? Or a lowly dice that you can afford to lose? Something that fits the core concept of the game. The dice are right there, but they go really underutilized outside of combat. As always, all criticism comes with a giant asterisk that this will change over the course of early access. This is just how it is right now, talking about games. But I do find the devs' early access plans quite limited, quite sparse. Additional biomes and alternate paths don't seem to be on these plans. Controller support is there, thank God, because this would be a great game to play on the Steam Deck, but right now you have to use the Steam Deck mouse controls, which I hate, so I exclusively played on PC. With the game's popularity, I'd love to see the devs return to this section with a bit more ambition. Overall, Die in the Dungeon has a really solid mechanical core, but one which left me wanting more. More challenges, more areas, more enemies. The dice are well fleshed out, but the main structure of the game could do with some further development. More relics and combos providing different paths to victory is what this game needs in spades. Even just some relics that are overclocking each type of dice would give the combat some sorely needed variety. Variety is there in the battles and it is good, but across battles, across the game, just needs some growth. Wanting more isn't a bad thing necessarily, it just meant I really enjoyed what was here. It's quite a positive flaw, like going into a job interview and saying that you worked too hard. Just set that expectation for yourself if you're going into this one. You're looking at closer to a dozen hours rather than dozens of hours of gameplay. At least, if you're someone like me. But those were my thoughts. What did you think about Die in the Dungeon? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoy a good roguelike and someone talking at you about them, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.